Hello and good evening. It's great to have you all here, and really we're delighted to have Elaine Smith here as our first person to set off the webinars that we're doing for Voices for Scotland. And before I introduce Elaine, who, many of you don't need me to introduce, she's so familiar to us all, although I'm sure we don't know all her talents. I just want to do a wee bit of housekeeping, just so that you know what you do when. So Clara and Alan, who are the team from Voices for Scotland, they're just back from being furloughed and have got this up and running in no time at all. They're going to be on hand for you if you've got any problems, so just message them in the chat if you want a wee handout with anything. If you're going to come in and ask a question, we'd ask you to put your camera on, because it's really great, and then it feels like we're having a proper conversation together. And at the moment, what you can do is rename your Zoom. So you rename Zoom and put your first name and your location on, so that, again, as you're chatting, we have some idea who it is, not just kind of Dad's iPad or that kind of thing that can often come up on these things. So as I say, our first webinar for Voices for Scotland, and Voices for Scotland is a civic organisation. We're not party political, but it is a political organisation because our purpose is to build the case for independence. And through a lot of discussion and research and so on, we found that our role, and the reason I joined Voices, was that our role is not to do shouty politics, as I've heard Elaine describe it, but to really open up opportunities to talk to each other, because we change our minds person by person, and we'll follow people. We don't follow statistics and so on. So stories are the things that often make the difference. So here we are, beginning with Elaine, one of the best storytellers in Scotland. I was saying to her this afternoon, having a wee look at her biog, and she's described as a national treasure. I kind of wonder how that feels, Elaine, when you're described as that. But she
old. It usually means you're old.
Oh no, not at all. So she's an actress, which, a comedian, a writer, a singer, a raconteur, and I love that you have in your biog, you're a political activist. Yeah. I was reading that thinking, that's my kind of woman, definitely.
Sadly for other people, it makes them go, don't want to know that.
Yes. Well, we'll come on to that, Elaine, because it's, I mean, from my generation, your great fame was as Mary Daw, who will be in our hearts forever here in Scotland. Rabsy Nesbitt, one of the programmes that they had to run with subtitles in the rest of the UK, which always amused me slightly.
But you do know that it won the Golden Rose of Montreux. It got the award there because it was subtitled, and it was huge in Holland and places in Germany. because of the fact that they could understand, and because I said at one point to this German guy, what does it get subtitled into German? He said, no, it gets subtitled into English, and we read it in English. So I love that. And I don't think it was broadcast with subtitles, but they were available on CFAX, and a lot of people who wanted to catch it a wee bit more. And I have to say, programs like The Wire, set in Baltimore and all that, there were lots of programs like that. Is very, very useful, and you actually catch a lot more of the richness of it too.
I'm of an age where everything's got subtitles.
Yes, I'm getting there too, Audrey. I'm getting there too.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm sure everybody's wanting to know is what's happening with Two Doors Down. Because, so maybe you could give folk an update on that before
Yeah,
I go
I
in.
will. Well, we were supposed to be filming series 5 in June, and COVID, of course, put the kibosh on all of that. And then we were supposed to be starting in about 4 weeks. And only last week we got told we're not filming until March now. And I think I can sort of understand, because the way that Two Doors Down is filmed, not to get too technical with it, but the best scenes in Two Doors Down are when we're all in that living room, eating or whatever. Now, generally, even the Burn Supper episode we did, I think took 3 days to shoot, just as round that table. I think we had 42 haggises that had to be opened. So the logistics of that, because there are 9 actors sometimes in very close proximity in a living room. So think of that with 2 cameras, 2 camera assistants, 2 sound people, makeup, wardrobe. I mean, at times it can be 30 people in that very confined space. How you police that, how you make that a safe environment, for people. And if you don't do that, do you change the nature of the program? So, and I know that the scripts have been all written. I think, although I did suggest that we should have a Christmas episode that should just be done on Zoom, that it should be Christine attempting to work the Zoom camera in a Zoom quiz with them next door and all that. So we could all be separate and film it, and it would be very funny, but
it would be.
well, that I think sadly that is what has happened in the industry. The great thing about it is though that during COVID, I think we've reached nearly 30 million views on iPlayer. So it's massive.
You're finding a new group of people are watching it,
totally, and people desperate for something to watch, and it's word of mouth. People go, oh, you should watch that, it's really funny. And I realised that a few weeks ago in the area I live in Glasgow, the amount of people that were stopping me going, oh my God, that's got me through lockdown. I'd never watched it before, so if it's doing a wee bit of that, that's great. So it means we'll have a bigger audience when we get out there too. So.
And before we move on, I just wanted to speak to you a wee bit about your play for the National Theatre of Scotland, which is just a wonderful piece.
The great Val McDermott did it, and I knew that NTS were doing stuff like that, and I got in touch with the producer Callum Smith and said, look, if you think there's anything suitable, sitting around doing nothing. And literally, he said a couple of days later, they had commissioned Val to do something, and it all came together, and Val went, oh, Elaine, brilliant, and Maggie Kinloch directed. It was great. And it was a very peculiar way to film something. But as soon as I read the script, I thought, oh, this will work. Because I knew, I said to Val actually while we were rehearsing, because you rehearse on Zoom, so Val was in Fife and Maggie was down in Lochwinnock, and I was in Glasgow with my daughter, who's a young actress, who fortunately has done a lot of filming of stuff, with my iPhone filming in her office, mocking it up to look like a radio studio. But I said to her, at the beginning of this, we couldn't have shot this. It wouldn't have been right. It wouldn't have been, I don't think it would have resonated, because we were still in the throes of what it meant.
Yes, making sense.
And so I felt when we did it, how timely it was, that enough time had passed for us to realise how many people had died, and how many people had lost people, and also that we'd all got a sort of collective shock of everything that's gone on there, and having a bit of perspective on it, and forgetting that the impact of not being able to have a funeral for your loved one or it would be huge and will live forever with people, you know.
Yes.
So I was really glad, and it's had something like 100,000 views already and stuff. So, and it's been chosen, I think it goes out on BBC. They've chosen a few of them, and they're going to put it out on iPlayer and then put it out on the BBC Scotland channel as well, because they're desperate for stuff to put on.
Yes, yes, and it's terrific, as you say.
Oh, thank you.
The
Thank you.
writing's amazing, and your portrayal of the DJ. I mean, I feel I'm quite choked talking about it, especially because I know people, you know, who've been in that position as well. Yeah. So, how has lockdown been for you then, Elaine?
I think, like most people, a bit of a roller coaster. I was doing a breastplate puntilla at the Lyceum, and I've never been in a show before that hasn't finished the run. So we literally just closed on the 14th of March, 10 days before lockdown or whatever, and we could see the audiences, although it was on performances that were sold out, only half the audience were there, because people themselves were being cautious about being in a theatre. And I remember looking out one night and thinking, why did they not just bring all the audience together? They're all in different pockets. And I thought, oh, that's why, because you only want to sit with people you know. And it just became untenable. But the it had been for about a week, but the theatre itself couldn't shut down until they had government permission, if you like, or they wouldn't have been insured, they wouldn't, all of those. So people had to wait. But going in and clearing my dressing room in the middle of a run and knowing we weren't going to get the citizens with it, saying goodbye to all the other actors when you hadn't completed something was one of the most bizarre experiences. And I have to give a shout out to Creative Scotland, because they paid everybody to the end of the contract, because they knew that they had already allocated the money to the Lyceum, and they said, and the citizens, and they said, no, they should all be paid. The money's been allocated. So I was really glad, because it was a big cast and lots of young actors, you know, with no work coming at the other end. And initially, there was a bit of me feeling like I was on holiday, you know, that I knew at the end of that run I was going to have a break anyway before I was filming. So there was a part of me enjoying the fact that I was getting the break I'd needed for 15 years. and not running around trying to, you know, do politics, do charity stuff. Everything just stopped. But then this creeping realization of what was going on outside. And so initially and I'm old as well, so being confined to my house watching the telly is not that big an imposition for people, but I did really feel it for young people. My daughter and her husband were in New York on holiday. The day, you know, I had to fly back on early. They had been going for St. Patrick's Day for my son-in-law's birthday, 40th birthday, and that all. And so he then came back, and of course he got COVID as well. So the sort of isolation of that, the fact we're very lucky in that we converted our house, we were going to sell our house, and our daughter and husband and granddaughter live upstairs, so we share the garden. They're two separate houses. So I was able to see my grandbaby every day, which for so many grandparents, I just think must have been awful, that they just couldn't access that or whatever. And for a long time, there were no hugs or anything either, I know. But just being able to see them. But I don't think I realised what a toll it had taken until the weekend of Black Lives Matter and 40,000 dead. And I found myself, there's been a general level of anxiety all the way through, but I was standing in the kitchen and I just burst into tears and I couldn't stop crying. There was a sort of darkness about the world. And that you were getting everything that was being fed to you, even though you knew your friends and family were okay and safe. You know, Trump, Erdogan, you know, Bolsonaro, all these awful men throughout the world, you know,
Yeah.
Johnson, looking and thinking the level of ignorance, the level of no compassion or intelligence, I think really, really got to me.
Yeah.
Ironically, since then, I've, as lockdown has eased slightly, just been able to come into the countryside again. And we are very, very fortunate to have, I haven't been able to come to our house for 7 months, but driving through the Highland fault line, again, just south of Dunkeld, I burst into tears again. Because somewhere I'd internalised that maybe I would never see it again.
Yes.
You know, if I got sick, if I'm in my 60s, my husband's is 68,
yeah.
You know, that fear that everyone's living with of not knowing what's around the corner, and I think that it's a very fragile state of affairs we're in just now. And finding, you know, the great, I've read 14 books. I've watched all of Schitt's Creek, which is fantastic. I have managed to watch things like that and keep in touch with friends and family and make sure they're okay. But it's a very, very odd time. And Val McDermott was talking about that, but she was really glad that the book that she had just finished was set in the 1980s, because she said, I don't think I could write about now. I think we have to get to an almost post-COVID, but it's increasingly feeling like we might never get to post-COVID, you know. So
yeah, there's amazing stats around that, isn't there?
Yeah.
I was speaking to someone yesterday and we were saying that probably there's a pre-COVID and then there's now, and those of us in the transition are the ones who find it hardest.
Yeah.
You know, but is there anything you'd keep from lockdown, do you think? Is there anything you'd want to?
I'll never go back to working as hard as I did. I'll never go back to, it's taken me to now really to not feeling as exhausted.
Yeah.
I think I've been working like many women, and particularly in my industry, as you get older, there's a thing where you go, you just keep working because the work's coming in. And as a woman, generally you've got to do 4 jobs for the, you know, to prove yourself compared to the one that a guy would get, you know. Certainly over my lifetime, slightly different now, but over my lifetime, I generally have had to do more work and more things to keep a career going. But also that I think I not having to prove myself as much to myself.
Yes.
And thinking, what was I going to do? Just work flat out for the next 5 years and then turn around and go, yeah, I'll retire now and be too old to enjoy it. And so I think it has made me really consider what I will do and what I won't do, much more, and appreciating that time. And that what really matters, I mean, it's a cliche, but what really matters is your family and your friends, and getting to see them and having time with them, as opposed to, oh, I can't do that because I'm doing this job, or I'm away on tour, or I'm away. So I think there are very positive things about lockdown.
Yeah.
If you haven't lost someone, or if you have been financially all right and have a garden. Yes. But if you're in a tower block with 2 kids, a single parent with no way of getting out, and visiting a local food bank, I don't think there'll be much positivity there.
There'll be not much to take down there, will there? Not at all. And to some extent,
I'm trying to be cheery.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
And that was the tone of what I was asking. But to some extent, it's more people have become aware of the inequalities, which, you know, is an interesting thing. I've heard so many people say, I'm so grateful for what I have, much more than you'd ever hear.
Oh, absolutely. Because we were on and I was on it as well, you know, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And in actual fact, this is enough. You know, I've been lucky in my life that there have been certain times in my life that I've been able to go, do you know, if this is as good as it gets, thanks.
That'll be okay.
And
Yeah.
they have been real transformative moments in my own life of going, if this is it. And then of course you go back to work, you find yourself in the hamster's wheel again, and saying, oh, I should do that, or I better do that, or this is, and getting back into really bad old habits, and no gratitude. No gratitude about it. You know, and all of us have been, you know, I think society has been like, well, when I've got that car, or when I've got that house, or when I've got that sofa, then my life will be great. When I've got that size of telly, you know.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, Audrey, and that for lots of people, just looking at having a garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, being able to get people coming and visiting you because you've got a garden.
Yes.
And you can socially distance and be aware. And I think in many ways, COVID has been like a bomb going off throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of shrapnel coming up. A lot of people realizing the inequalities within our Black ethnic minority communities and about poverty. Mm-hmm. This is so unequal, this world. And one would hope that, my great hope is that austerity will be seen as the real folly that it is. And that my sincere hope is that the bankers and Europe and the World Bank, European Central Bank, do not go back to adopting austerity as a way to create some sort of wealth for the people who are already wealthy. I'm being hopeful here, whether they will or not, who knows. But
well, and I guess in part what we're all doing here is what role can we play to try and ensure that doesn't happen, because it's been so cruel, and for lots of people the pandemic has increased that cruelty. But before we move on from your career, you were saying, you know, those moments. What's the role you've most enjoyed?
Oh, like, you know what, I've enjoyed loads for very different reasons. I loved playing Shirley Valentine, you know, a one-woman show. Yeah. Being able to do that and find out that I had my own audience, and being able to do that in theatre, that was a real eye-opener for me to do, and see so many people come to see it and blah, blah, blah. That changed, that was a transformative thing in my life. You know, Mary Nesbitt, for all the reasons, because of how loved that programme was, how, you know, revolutionary in lots of ways in Scotland it was at the time. Yeah. She was a wonderful character. We got a lot of stick for it as well. You know, there's a lot of people, oh, that's a dreadful image to give of Scotland. Why don't they come to my newly sandblasted tenement in Rutherglen, and then they'd see the real Scotland, you know, and you're like, you know, there was a lot of snobbery about it. Yes. Yes. And what I realised was a lot of people thought I wasn't acting. They thought that real Scottish cringe thing, that if you're acting within your own accent, you're not really acting. So, and I always think, nobody says to Al Pacino, oh no, the American accent again, you know, or Robert De Niro or whatever. But as soon as it's a Scot, you're not really an actor unless you're speaking like this and being proudly actory. So there was a lot of snobbery around about that, but I think in retrospect, people have re-examined it to a certain extent, and the public were always ahead of the critics anyway. But that, and oh God, just even getting to play something like Puntilla in the Brecht play, to play that, I was the first woman in the world, because it's generally a man, to play Puntilla in it, whether you liked it or not, but that was quite a significant thing. Susan Boyle, to do that, and I Dreamed a Dream, was an amazing experience. Christine in Two Doors Down, she's just a joy, a pure and utter joy. To get to swear that much on television is just bloody brilliant. I nearly said another word there,
Yeah.
but it might be taken off air. But so, you know, and the panto dames that I've done, you know,
Yeah.
I loved in Sleeping Beauty. Nanny Be Good is certainly one of my favourite panto characters to do. And Mrs. Potty and Beauty and the Beast, you know, loads of them. So I have had a career blessed with fantastic characters to play over the years.
And a huge range. I mean, it's amazing the range that you've done. Is there one role that you'd really love to play still?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Always wanted to play Mama Rose and Gypsy. You know, sing out, Louise. I've always wanted to do that. A part made for me, but one that I'll probably never get the chance to do. There was a chance at one point, but there are really, really tough restrictions about how that show is done because of who wrote it and all of that. But that probably would, yeah, if I to get to play that in Gypsy. But actually, I'm more than happy. I mean, even something like Calendar Girls, although it wasn't the lead role doing that, to be part of something like that, the Steamy, to be part of that, I just feel very lucky to. So I'm almost frightened to ask for anything else. You know, I've got enough.
You've had
there's such wonderful, talented people out there, particularly talented women. So my role now is to go, come on, here. Yeah. And one of the best things somebody said to me the other day was doing an interview, a young actress, and she said, you know, you don't realise, but what you've done is shown us the way.
Yes.
Because in my generation, there was no way. Mm-hmm. The women who went before were almost written out of history and written out of variety. When you talk about comics, when you talk about pantomime, it's men.
Yeah.
And actually made that today, the radio phoned me wanting to talk about panto and it not going on or whatever this year. And I said, well, I'm really glad you got it because it's all been male voices. And so it just pulls researchers up a wee bit to go, oh yeah, there are women out there doing stuff, you know. Yeah. And what I want to do now is say to young women, look, here's a path. Come on, do it your own way, but here's the route. And don't think that Janie Godley said that thing, you know, I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if I hadn't watched you. I would, and other young actors, contemporaries, and that's a great thing to have more than anything in my life.
Yes, that's a great gift to tell you that, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah. Very humbling, very humbling. Because as an actor, you're just trying to get what and pay the mortgage like everybody else.
and lots of us forget that. You're right. Just before we move on to questions, and I know there's loads, and I saw one flash up, not a question, but saying, and you're brilliant in pantomime. So
thank you.
As you were talking about the great roles that you've had, and I saw you in the Steamy, I still laugh about the Steamy.
I
can replay some of it in my head and laugh.
When I look back on that and think I couldn't do the telly on it, or Eileen McCallum, the wonderful Eileen, did it, and I recommended it because I was only 29 when I did it. Yeah. And actually I was pregnant with my now daughter who's 31, but and I couldn't do it because on screen I looked far too young. And you got away with that on stage, no bother. But on TV, and it was a great regret that I couldn't do the telly show. But at the same time, had I done it, I wouldn't have been available for the pilot episode of Rhapsody Nesbitt. So there you go. So swings and roundabouts.
Yes. Yeah. Before we move on to questions, just tell me, what took you into political activism?
Oh, well, I suppose I was brought up in a mining village outside Motherwell, Ute Hill. And political activism was all around me. And I don't mean with a capital P, I mean being a member of a trade union, being, my dad worked in Clyde Cramers. I remember my dad being a strike. I was young during the first miners' strike. I remember as having no electricity when the power was cut and all of that in the 70s. And an explanation from my family, not a particularly political one, but one where it was, this isn't right. And this is happening because they won't pay them out. And, you know, and there was a sort of collectivism and an attitude surrounding me, you know. And then at school, I had a wonderful history teacher called Norman Bissell, who actually lives in Ling and has just written a book about George Orwell, actually. And I think he was in the WRP or something like that. He was in a far left, but he politicized me. And I also had a dad, ironically, my dad wasn't particularly political. At times he could sound like he was to the right of Attila the Hun, you know, but on certain things, on women and certain attitudes. But he was amazing on Palestine, because he had been in the RAF and had been in Palestine when, you know, as he said, Begin was a terrorist, and he was there when they blew up the King David Hotel and all that. So my dad had a completely different perspective on Palestine and the Middle East. And I remember doing modern studies and being the only person in the class who even knew anything about Palestine. And that formulated, along with Norrie Bissell and the type of political teaching, and also encouraging opinions, encouraging disagreements in the class. I loved that. And then when I got to drama school, I was only 17 or whatever, but I joined the NU, National Union of Students, and I was in the student council. And again, that was right in the middle of the big strikes in education, and where I was part of the occupation of the Royal Academy. And I remember marching up to Jordan Hill and occupying the principal's office and sleeping there overnight and all that at 19. So politics was always there. And then when I became a teacher, I joined the EIS and was very, very involved in left politics in Edinburgh. And then my feminism grew through that time as well. So I was part of you know, Women's Voice and various groups that were around at that time. Brilliant women that I met, that I still see and meet to this day. I see them all in different political groupings, but it was an incredibly political time for, if you were a student and if you were, you know, there was a radicalization and an understanding of many, many people, a very formative time, and it's never left me. Yeah. And my politics are based on, that's no fair, that's not right, it's not a dogma. If I thought that the Tories were going to come out with some policy that was really fantastic, don't think that's going to happen, but if I thought they were right, I would say that that's a good policy. Do you know, I think it's really important to be open and really important to understand. And obviously my politics were formed in Labourism and left Labourism and all of that. But gradually during that time in Edinburgh, particularly when I was marching for El Salvador, or I went to Nicaragua, I was very involved in Scottish Medical Aid, and went out to Nicaragua and stuff in the late 80s. After my daughter was born, I went out as part of a big group, which was amazing. But I kept thinking, wait a minute, why are we allowed to march for El Salvador? But if you mention independence for Scotland, you were some sort of a tartan Tory traitor to the socialist cause. And I could never equate why believing in self-determination for Scotland was different. And that really sowed the seeds, that and Thatcher, of a different route for me. It's a very long answer to that, Audrey, but that's where it was fundamentally sown, if you like.
So I've got so many questions in my head. I'm going to bring in other people.
Right, okay.
It's time to do that. Clara's saying that there's a first question from Kenny. So can Kenny come in?
Hello, Kenny. Is he there?
There, Kenny. Yeah, I see. Do you want to put your camera on, Kenny? And you're on mute, just to remind you.
Maybe he doesn't want us to see him.
Yeah. Oh, there he is. There he is.
There you are. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Elaine. Nice to speak to you.
How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm sitting in Kuwait. It's almost 50 degrees here.
Oh my God.
Not
You think
pleasant.
we're having a lovely day because it's been 22 here today.
Anyway, what I was going to ask is, I know like the independence campaign hasn't begun yet, properly. I'm just wondering if, like, when the COVID thing is run down a little bit and the campaign starts, are you going to take a major role? Because as a much loved person with, like, particularly I was thinking of women who are soft nose, as we say, like the women who voted no last time. Would you be doing something that would maybe change their minds? Like, would you be very visual in that campaign?
I think I would hope. I would hope to be, in a way. And I have no ambition about it, if you like. I think you always have to watch actors, particularly with their own egos. And I've witnessed it myself, that I think you always have to be present and look at where best you need. It's why I'm not a member of a political party. I've never done it. And I do remember saying, when asked by the SNP and things, and I said, look, I'm more used to you outside the party. Yes. Because the way the press and the media do all, and loads of people think I'm a member of the party simply because I support independence. Yes. There's no nuance in it. There's no way. But I do remember being on, which was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done, was being on the big STV debate with the only non-politician. It was absolutely terrifying. But I do remember a friend's mum, who was a Labour, eminent writer's mum, Labour voter all her life. And she said to me, oh son, your pal was on, I really like her. She nearly made me vote yes.
Nearly.
And I thought, well, and I know that different voices coming in. But I also know that do I really think that any celebrity really makes that much difference? I don't think so. I think it can put as many people off. In the true Scottish, who does she think she is telling me? I don't want anything to do with her, you know. So and you get that, she's Mary Nesbitt. Who does she? So I think over the years, though, I've cultivated enough of I don't mean respect, but of people going, she actually is an activist. She is not someone that's just along so she can get her face on the telly, sort of thing. Yeah. And in a curious way, I found that even people who vehemently disagreed with me, there was a level of respect, a grudging respect, that you'd stood for your principles. Mm-hmm. And it did have a big effect on, you know, you could say cheerio to my corporate work for 2 years, you know, after dinners. Mm-hmm. Even BBC wouldn't have me to do voiceovers because my voice, and I know from friends who were yes voters who worked in there, when they suggested me, they go, oh, no, she's too yes. She's a yes voter, we can't have her on. But, do you know, I just thought, well, tough, that's their loss. And so I think in a curious way, there was a respect, because being a yes voter at that time might have got you a bit of popularity or a prominent yes spokesman within the movement. Outside the movement, it drew a lot of negativity and a lot of ire from people about what you were doing. So I would consider it, and I would only want to be if I thought I would be of use. And the way I think I'm of use is listening. and listening to those women of my generation and older and younger, and understanding why they were so scared. And I remember being at something where I did say, do you know, if most women in Scotland, or many women in Scotland, are not independent within their own marriages, within their own lives, how can they envisage independence for a country? When they are worried about, they haven't paid into a big pension for years and years. They're worried where their dad was maybe, or their older brother was in the RAF, who had an allegiance to, or the army, who have an allegiance to Britain. A Britain that, in my view, no longer existed, was sold off to the highest bidder. But I understand that tie to something that meant a great deal to a lot of people, and particularly the fear, women who weren't on the internet, who weren't getting the news, they weren't in the echo chamber of the Yes movement, they were reading the Daily Express. Yeah. Or they were getting, it's interesting that more men support independence because they know what independence is. They've lived independently. Whereas for women, I think it was a bigger leap for a lot of them. So we have to understand that and speak to them directly, but most importantly, listen to their fears. And I do think that over, ironically, these past awful months, someone like Nicola has helped in that for those who couldn't envisage an independent Scotland, they're seeing how an independent Scotland might work. Yeah. And that has actually moved more, because we who are already over the bridge, if you like, and we are, yes, this is great. We know, we look at Norway or Denmark and go, we could be like that. For many people, they just can't see it. How would it be different? Here's something that's different. In the worst of circumstances, you know, here's how we could manage, even within the limited powers we have, to do things a wee bit better and a wee bit differently. Yeah. So good governance, I think, has done a lot to shift people's opinions. I don't know whether you agree with that or not.
I do. I remember that awful Better Together advert with the woman and the company. Oh, yeah. And that's the kind of woman that maybe you're talking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I felt very sorry for that poor actress who got pelters for doing it, and she was just doing a job, you know. But also, I'm in Women for India and all of that, and so you have a lot of feminist, articulate, intelligent, forward-thinking political women going, how dare you portray women like that? Hey, wait a minute, they're our sisters, and they were the questions. Be aware, those are the questions that Better Together had gone out and researched really intensely to go, this is what women are saying. Yes. This is what women are frightened about. And then also you sort of drive a wedge between women in the old sisterhood as well, because half of us start, say, patronising the other half, going, how can they not know that, or whatever. But understanding where women are, I think, is a really, really important thing. And I think gradually over these last few years, you have seen a shift in women. And it worried me. I remember Caroline Leckie, who was an MSP many years ago, and is a great friend, and Women for India, saying that on the day that we're in Buchanan Street, all celebrating, and from the top of Buchanan Street down before the vote, what she watched was a trail of women with their shopping just walking past, and thinking, this is not for me. Yes. I'm not part of this, or I've sent my postal vote in anyway. So I think we have to be very aware. And one of the big mistakes for me was that was celebrating a bit too much when they should have been out chapping doors and getting people out, you know, thinking it was one, and it clearly wasn't.
Yeah, there's lots to learn from all of that.
Oh,
thank you, Jenny.
Jenny, thank you.
Great question. Now, I think there was Valeria had her hand up with a question. Are you there, Valeria? I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You still with us? Yeah. Valerie, oh, it's Valerie. Yeah. Do you want to put your
Sorry,
when you're coming? If you
had
put
a
your
mistake. I pressed the wrong
Valerie.
button. Sorry. Hello, Elaine. I'm sorry. I didn't have a question. I just had pressed the wrong button and trying to get set
sorry.
up. Sorry about that.
Is there anything you want to say while you're
No,
on?
no, I've enjoyed it. It's
You're
wonderful
escaping,
listening to
enjoying it. Good.
thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Linda actually sent in a couple of questions earlier, so I'll ask Linda to come in. And just remember, folks, if you're coming in to ask your question, put your camera on because we want to see you. And I know Linda's done great work with her own website on positive. Yes, for Scotland. I think that's the name. Yep, here she is. Hi, Linda. Do you want to put your camera on? There you go.
There we are.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Hello, hello.
Hiya, nice
Hi,
to-
Linda, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks, Audrey. Elaine, I'm one of the many people who was due to go and see at the Lyceum, Mrs. Pintill and her man Mitty, and it was, pulled the week before we were due to go. So we're hoping it was a postponement rather than a cancellation.
Well, we'll see if we ever get back. But it was quite an adventure, I have to say, to do it, to take on something that big and all of that. I think there's some good stuff in there, but hopefully, who knows?
Well, so my question really relates to the creative industries in Scotland.
Yeah.
And let's think positively and let's look forward. And once Scotland is independent, what creative flowering of Scotland, if you will, are you looking forward to? What do you think will happen? What cultural forces will rise to the fore once we're independent, once we have our own voice on the international stage again?
Well, we've always sort of in a way punched above our weight, if you like. I think what I would hope for, there will inevitably be a lot of navel gazing as to who we are. Who are we now that we're independent? Who, in a way like in the feminist movement where we don't all agree on everything. We don't all agree in the arts on everything, but I hope there will be a sort of backing of the arts in a way that until this point has been almost modelled on a form of the arts from other countries. I think we should look beyond, and I think for women to come to the fore, I think there's a huge amount of talent out there. How that gets tapped, how we bring that forward is the perennial question, that everybody does. But I do think post-COVID, we are in a different world. And I was speaking to the wonderful Val McDermott the other day, and she was saying that she was really glad that the novel that she had just finished wasn't set at this time, that she was able to do it because she doesn't know how she'll be able to write about this time. I think it's not that there isn't a huge amount of talent already there. There's a massive amount of untapped talent out there with little access, particularly, for instance, in an independent Scotland, I would hope that we would have a television station that was actually fully funded, as opposed to some great things that are on the BBC Scotland channel. Great, blah, seen some fabulous stuff. Not enough, not funded well enough, not out there speaking to the country, if you like. And when we're consistently getting our news and our culture through, as the great Dick Gawkins says, when we're constantly looking at ourselves through the eyes of another nation, then it's not that the other nation is wrong, is that the vision or the view of ourselves is really, really difficult to access and speak to. And that inevitably, if it's not funded, it looks poorer. it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as, it's not shot as well. It doesn't have the same funding. It doesn't have all of that. So you would hope that in an independent Scotland, just something as simple as broadcasting would flourish. Meaning that the talent that is out there would come back, the writing, particularly for women, bringing women back in and allowing our theatres and places to flourish. But it won't happen immediately. It won't. It will be a really, really difficult process, I think.
What I'm looking forward to, one of the many, many things that I'm looking forward to is that Scotland, by becoming again an independent nation, regaining her independence, will naturally have to have, you know, consuls and embassies from around the world here, you know, and I think that'll be a fantastic opportunity for lots of cultural exchange, you know, and brokering new exchanges and new, you know, new thoughts, new ways of seeing the world. I think you're quite
I think you're right in that one of the problems is being that in order for Scottish talent and the arts has to go through another sort of funnel, if you like, another channel to get out to the rest of the world. If it has to go through another arts body, another arts council, if the funding is coming from somewhere else, how do you do that exchange? For instance, as you rightly say, if there are embassies here, then things are different. How do you make that difference? And I remember going to Dublin 20 odd years ago, 30 years ago for the first time, and thinking, why do we not have this? Do you know, it was a real, why do we not have that? And that's not to say that everything in Ireland or Dublin is perfect, but there was more of an outward looking exchange in ideas and writing and all of that, and more people coming in, and you would hope that sort of stuff would flourish.
I'm really hopeful that there'd be a new like 21st century enlightenment.
Yes,
Renaissance, a cultural rebirthing as well as a political and social one.
I agree with that, although ironically, I remember reading Arthur Herman's book on the Enlightenment is just fantastic, and a great perspective from a non-Scot who wishes he was Scottish, but him talking about the fact that it was because we weren't politically independent, all the politicians had buggered off to London, that this flourishing of art and light and looking across Europe was there. So you would hope we would be able to do both. Certainly, I would just love to see our National Theatre on a par with what is happening down south and what it is able to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great questions, Linda. And
thanks,
really,
Elaine.
yeah, really nice the way you were able to bring in a real hopefulness. You got me quite excited. And
as Harvey Milk said, you've got to give them hope.
Always, you're right. Hope is what people need. Light and hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move on and bring in Yvonne because she's got a question as well. Thanks, Linda, again.
Thank you, Linda. Hello, Yvonne.
Yvonne. Yep, you want to put your camera on, Yvonne?
Yep.
Hello.
Hello. This is wonderful. I put on lipstick because you had lipstick on, Elaine. So I thought
always.
I didn't actually have a question after all of this because I was working with the screen and made a mistake. Sorry.
Oh wow! There you go.
But I think it's a great idea, and I was really struck by something you said earlier that I had never thought of before, and I don't know why. It's what you're saying about in 2014 and women who maybe weren't independent in their own lives, unable to consider. That has, you know, as someone who's a feminist, I don't know why that's never occurred to me before.
I remember a wee woman interviewed when, well, I can't remember whether it was some organisation, I can't remember, and her saying, what do you think about independence? And she said, well, I don't know, I'm going to ask my man what he thinks. And I thought, if there are women in Scotland who cannot envisage independence in their own lives, how can they imagine it for a country? How can you go to that place? So it seems like a concept that is too big. Now that's not to say that millions of women did envisage it, and there are many women on the other side who saw it and thought, not for me, I'm not interested, I don't want to do this, and you know, we've got to respect their rights as well. Even in an independent Scotland, you know, there'll be 25% of folk who are Tories, and it's not that we're saying you can't live here. You know, differences of opinion and political opinion are what makes a thriving democracy. But I was aware that there were women who couldn't envisage independence in their own lives, never mind for a country. Yeah. So we've had to move really on that, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because we started a group up in Deeside, but when I say we, it was myself and a couple of people got involved, called Indie Books and Bleathers, Deeside, because I thought we're in a Tory area and it's sometimes quite hard to even admit that you're an independent supporter, because you're shut down so much. And the very first time we met, what we do is we meet at different cafes throughout Deeside. We choose different places to make ourselves visible, actually, so that people aren't just talking about it in their house. And the very first time we met in a Boyne, and this lady who came along, and she was from, I think her family were from the Netherlands, and she was really comfortable about talking about politics. And she said, so are we talking about independence for Scotland, or personal independence, or independence for women? And I thought, you know, that was about the first thing. Yeah, that was the very first thing she said. And I said, well, I'm sure we'll hit them all, maybe not necessarily in order. And so I think
a huge swathe of the female population in Scotland who couldn't envisage independence in their own lives. So how can they envisage it for a country? That's why it was so important. You know, you could see in the polls, more men were able to go, yeah, why don't we run? You know, because they've experienced it. If you've never had that, how do you imagine it? How do you envisage it? And I think that's why I loved Women for Indie and things like that coming along, and identifying that the discourse and the language was very, very male, and also at a point that wasn't actually addressing where many, many thousands of women were.
I think that's a point, because we said with our Indie Books and Bleathers that it was for people who were new, for women who were new to discussing politics, because a lot of my friends in Deeside were going, oh, but I don't know enough about this, I couldn't come along, I don't know about politics. And so we were trying to make it kind of user friendly. It's okay to be new to this, you still have valid input, and to do a lot of listening. But then of course the COVID's come along, and we can't have our regular meetings now in different cafes and things along Deeside. So I think we're going to have to turn to Zoom and start doing it this way, because I think for the foreseeable, I think we're going to be relying on Skype and Zoom and stuff for a lot.
I think so too, because people will be afraid. People will, until there is, if there ever is a vaccine, I think people will, and they're dealing with a certain. It's the thing for me is that if women couldn't envisage independence in their own lives, how can they envisage it for a country?
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
So that for me is where we've had to work, and I actually think there has been a lot of work done on that in the last 6 years, and will continue to be. Women looking at even having a woman first minister, even seeing women in positions of power and all of that, and that regardless of how you voted in the Indie Ref, there was a great politicizing of the country. To have, even if you were going to vehemently vote no, there was an engagement, and that doesn't go away. I don't think people unlearn that. And I think during this, one of the problems we had, I think, in the Yes movement, that was that we were speaking to ourselves too much. and not reaching out as much as we should have, particularly to other women.
Well, Yvonne, you've done well for somebody who didn't have a question.
And you were brilliant. Well done,
With-
lovely
Thank
to
you.
see
Great
you.
discussion.
Thank
I
you.
couldn't even get in.
sorry.
So,
And your timing's perfect because my husband's just come and said tea's ready, so I have to go.
Wow, there
excellent,
you go.
excellent.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yvonne, do use Zoom. It works very well. In fact, in some ways with Zoom, sometimes you can feel like you've got an even bigger connection because you're right in the room together. So there's a bit of the stranger on the train scenario as well.
Yeah, that's very true, Audrey, actually. That's very true.
So I've got a question from Bill now.
Yeah.
Bill, are you ready to ask us your question? And just remind you to put your camera on. Here he is.
I'm very impressed that you're doing all this, Audrey. It's very good.
I'm getting used to having various things around.
Yeah.
I suspect we could go on all night, but I'm being told that a few more questions and then that's probably it. You'll be exhausted, Elaine.
I'm fine. It's
Good.
been lovely.
Yeah. Bill, in you come.
Okay, is the technology working okay? The first time I've done this.
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi Elaine, thanks for doing this and sharing
Not
your
at all.
time with us. Strange times, with COVID and everything, but also kind of strange times for the independence movement. We've got some really good stuff happening with the polls and with the stature that Nicola's gaining, and some less good stuff happening with some of the falling out within the independence movement, or apparent falling out, and issues like what's happened with the SQA and the mediation of exams. So I was wondering, with your experience and your empathy, is there a couple of things you think supporters of independence should be doing? Maybe one a bit more of, something we should be doing a bit more of, and one other thing we should be doing a bit less of?
I think, very, very good question. This is my personal opinion. I wonder how much is actually generated, the heat round all the disagreements is generated by people who disagree, by people who have other motives, and enjoy. Now, do I think the SNP have done everything right? No, I do not. Do I think that where things are slightly slower than we would want? Absolutely. Do I think in a way, in a curious way, COVID in all its awfulness has demonstrated what can be done by a separate government, even with limited powers, in the desire to protect its people. And I think that message is probably a lot more powerful than people are aware of, particularly those of us who've been across the bridge for 30 years, campaigning and whatnot. And, it's the old footballing term. I think we've got to keep our shape here, We've got to keep our shape and stop. Our enemies want this, if we want to call them that. The people who vehemently disagree with it, the forces of the British state, whatever you want to call them, this will suit them. They want us to fall apart. They want us to be arguing amongst ourselves about the way forward and how it's going to be. My message would be keep our shape, because there's a big prize ahead here. There's a very big prize ahead for this country. Now, do I think people are wrong to disagree? Not at all. I don't agree with the way. I'm an ex-teacher. I'm looking at what has happened with the SQA and going, oh my God, my politics are going, why have all these working class kids been more disadvantaged than others, blah, blah, blah. There was never going to be a perfect way to do this.
No.
There was never going to be a way, and I do think through the appeals process, this is the first time a government in history have ever had to do this. So there will be mistakes. There will be things and it is right for the media and right for parents and pupils to show what those mistakes have been, absolutely. But let's get it into perspective about what we can learn from it and how we can go forward as far as how damaging that may be. Let's also remember that for the vast majority of kids out there who are not sitting exams, who have no hope, who have, not getting a job, who are coming into a different world, it's not about whether they get into university or not. It's about, will they be able to have a job at all in the way our workforce is going, and what COVID has done to our society. So I think we need to get things into perspective a wee bit. I think the media are desperate for different stories. So anything that comes up and is highlighted, like exam time, of mistakes or missteps, then there's going to be a lot of heat generated around it. I suppose I have hope in that we do keep our shape in the independence movement for all our disagreements. And there are many. There are many of us who completely disagree with that route to Indy or whatever. This is what the enemies want. We've got to keep our eye on the bigger prize as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, what was the second part of your question there? That was
just something we should do a wee bit more of, and something we should do a wee bit less of.
I think the infighting, and I'm a member of Commonweal. I love Commonweal. I love everything, but I really am concerned, and it was said to me by a very prominent person in government, that all the enemies of independence have to do is pile up the Commonweal papers at times to throw back at the SNP or throw back at the Indy movement about what they're not doing right. And I think we have to be very careful, but we also have to be critical. It's okay to say to our government, you're not doing this right. This is too slow. But we have to always err on the side, hopefully, of giving a positive response, if we can, to moving forward. And I understand in the movement, it's not quick enough for people who crossed the bridge like me 30 years ago. It's not. And we're frustrated. But actually look at the polls. Good governance for me, and not perfect governance, but good governance, and particularly demonstrating to the Scottish public, who in the end who really matter, demonstrating the way forward, how things can be done differently. And maybe the Scots aren't ready for the revolution, but maybe they're ready for that incremental shift, as we're seeing, as it's been demonstrated of, oh, we could do that, oh, we are slightly different, oh, we can move that way, or that question hasn't been answered, but it's the old thing of keeping our shape a wee bit more. It doesn't mean we don't argue. It doesn't mean we don't disagree. It doesn't mean that that we don't criticise the Scottish Government when they get it wrong. That's what grown-ups do. A grown-up government and a grown-up population goes, that's all right. It doesn't mean it's a catastrophe, but you hold your government to account. So for me, I think holding the government to account is a really good thing, and the SNP to account. I think the SNP have made mistakes, will make mistakes, but I think we have to keep our eye on a much bigger prize. And who knows who would be in power in an independent Scotland. But if we try, it's not that we shouldn't envisage it and imagine it, but if we try to work out exactly what it's going to be like before we get it, and I think we just have to move. Maybe that's in the Scottish psyche anyway as well. So I suppose a bit more positive energy, if you like, I would like a bit more positive heat put on it, and less of the sniping, and I understand the frustration, but we don't, our enemies of independence want us fighting each other. That's what they want. So for me, it's about listening to the other, to Tories, listening to people going, but what would it be like if they can't envisage it? And it comes back to the question about women. For me, if women can't envisage independence in their own lives, how do they envisage it for a country?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of movement over the last few years since the NDREF. And what has been remarkable is that the people who voted have stayed. They didn't fall away. They've stayed, and it has built, and it has been cautious. And ironically, this crisis, I think, in many ways has brought more people to look at what we can do differently and actually seeing it, imagining it, and us governing relatively well. So I don't know whether that's hopeful or not. I don't know whether it helps at all.
I was hearing more listening and love and less arguing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would hope so. We really, and you know, you end up sounding like an old hippie or whatever, but I do, you know, to only see people on the other side as the enemy gets you nowhere. Yeah. You know, we have to take them with them. What is it in the old lefty? And we have to move forward in the broadest possible fashion.
Thanks a lot, Bill and Elaine.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taking on that really good question. We've got a question now from Julian. Just give him, I'm assuming it's...
He's logging on.
Here he is, yep. Great photo there. Have you got...
Yeah, I'll unmute.
Right, and your camera, or are you...
Yeah, start. There we go.
There you go.
Hello, hello.
Hello there. My question, it really relates back to the question before the previous one.
Yeah.
Because I felt that we are often highlighting a kind of national lack of self-belief, a lack of self-confidence. And one of my main reasons for seeking independence is that I want our people to be self-confident enough to take their place in the world. I have never liked this feeling that in order to get anywhere, you have to go to London, you have to go south. Almost everybody in my university class, including myself, went south. We didn't consider jobs in Scotland. It was, you had to go south because that was the place to go. And this lack of self-belief has dogged our country for decades and decades. I want to see an end to that, but how do we turn it around? And
that's a brilliant question.
And I wonder also if the word independence is a problem in itself. If some other term like self-determination or self-government or making decisions by the people, for the people, would be a better way of expressing it. Independence somehow puts people off the idea of self-government sometimes.
It's an excellent point you're making, and I do think particularly where women are concerned, if women can't envisage independence in their own lives, how can they envisage independence for a country if they don't understand really what it means? Whether there is a better term, I don't know. I'll leave that for others to come up with a better term. But that explanation for people, particularly women, I think, in Scotland. But we also are battling 300 years or more of being told we're no good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't rely on you can't be self-reliant. This is something as a woman and as a Scot I have battled in my own life. When you leave drama school, immediately you're basically told go to London. And I was fortunate in the late 70s, early 80s when I graduated. There were companies like 784 and Wildcat and the Sets and Borderline all working and employing people within Scotland and doing new work and new writing, which I know that for older actors, fine actors wasn't available. They had to move. They had to go in order, and then they could come back. I mean, I remember Russell Hunter, the great Russell Hunter, saying that he had to move to London to get the job in Callan, which was a huge series in the 70s, in order to get jobs in Scotland, because he became famous in London, and then people would go, oh, he must be good. And that dogged my own career for a long time, you know, acting within your own accent and staying in your own country was seen as somehow some bit of a failure. You know, you hadn't changed your accent and you hadn't actually been a big success in London. It was only when I did finally go to London and did Calendar Girls and I had a huge hit in the West End and all that I realised it wasn't any different. There was really rubbish actors in London, really great actors in London, just the same as here. But I had the chip on my shoulder as well about the no good enoughness. That's been there for a long, long time. If your media, if you're consistently being told that what you are, the country you live in, the people who live there are in some way substandard. You know, that we've been injected with, I call it the no good enough gene. That's a lot to counteract. And it's only when you do go away and then come back and go, wait a minute, we're no worse. Also, I hate the vainglorious, we're better than. We're not better than either. We're as good as any other independent country. Nobody says to the Swedes, oh, you're not speaking Norwegian, you're not doing a Norwegian accent, you know? Where we get, oh, you're speaking your own accent in some way as an actor. Oh, you're not being an actor and doing that. So I think that has really, really been built into our character somewhere. It's penetrated over a long, long time, that not being good enough. And I think over the last 25, 30 years, with the emergence of lots of great writers and all of and actors and also people staying here, people living and working in the arts and in the media in their own country, then that is more of a message, if you like, to other people and other to go. But I agree with you that there is a real level of not good enough. I think there's genetic in there. I believe it's from the Darien scheme, the failure of the Darien scheme, that we actually carry that somewhere in our genes, that in some way we shouldn't really get above ourselves. And that has been and that's why independence, I do think it's incremental. It has to be demonstrating that as a country we are able to do stuff. The public seeing the Scottish government dealing with a crisis like this, you have no idea what that does to people who couldn't even imagine the notion of independence, when you can't even imagine it in your own lives, to then see it in action in many ways, and seeing how a government could act differently, you know, and somebody say, oh yeah, but how could we pay for it? You know, we're getting all the stuff from the UK government at the moment about, yes, yeah, but you're like, wait a minute, we would borrow the same as you're borrowing. You know, but that's a very simple thing, that argument that even myself, I think, oh God, how could we have afforded? And I went, wait a minute, we would just borrow the same as anybody else. But anyway, carry on, keep going.
I have to take issue with that last thing.
Yes, carry on.
The Bank of England does not lend the government money. The Bank of England creates money just with a keyboard.
Yes.
We don't have to pay it back. It's not borrowed. It's not paid back. That is the frame in which austerity is pushed. That we've borrowed that money, we have to pay it back, and you're the ones that are going to pay it back.
And we don't.
No, and Nicola used the word borrow and pay back, and I think that was entirely wrong. She must, and we must all avoid saying borrow and pay back. That's not how government.
I think that's a very, very good point. But it's in there somewhere.
It is.
It's in there. I don't know whether it's intrinsically Scottish that we think, well, I've borrowed it, so I've got to pay it back. Yeah. And then you think, wait a minute, grown-up countries around the world are not thinking that way.
No. No, because that's not
A
the way
mortgage,
Parliament.
is
No,
it?
no, you're right,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah. Thanks.
So I don't know whether I've answered your question or not.
Yes, you have. Yes,
Okay.
you have very well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Great. We've had a great range of questions. I think I get to ask the last one, Elaine, before we
Okay.
throw things to a close.
I'm not doing a song, so don't ask me.
Oh yeah, come on. No. No, what I was wondering, and we've been speaking about this, I think, all night a bit, like the difference that it's made to people seeing the government in action, not just Nicola, but you know, the new CMO, and Jason Leach, who I've known well through working stuff, Jean Freeman doing an amazing job as well. And we're seeing democracy, you know, an adult democracy in action. What Nicola said is what she thinks is maybe happening with the polls is it's a bit of show, not tell. So, you know, we can tell people vote for independence, it's wonderful. But if you can show, just as you've been saying, mature governance, then people, you know, think, well, you know, yes, I can see that and we can be different. And so I was wondering if you would have, and this is quite a tricky question, so feel free to say no.
Okay.
Would you have a show, not tell, that you would really like the Scottish Government to focus on at the moment, something that you think could make a difference and that people would see as making a difference?
I think actually them standing up every day now, they've made mistakes. We have a terrible death toll here in Scotland.
Yeah,
and we should not shy away from that. And I don't think Nicola ever would.
No.
I don't think at the end of this it will be, you know, and what I love is the fact that they did change course when they realised that the course we were on, going along with everything the UK government wanted to do, was folly. I also know that their hands were tied, that they couldn't do anything. If they had locked down before the rest of the UK, can you imagine? Who does she think she, you know, scared? It would have been horrific. And it must have been awful to be sitting there knowing that you need to act and you can't because of what that would then do to the country. How many people would even obey by what you were saying, or if you put out rules before the rest of the UK. But I think during that, it is being about, that's why the Tories want to shut down Nicola's daily briefings and all of that, because they know it's powerful. Because what you're seeing, and people are tuning into that, not Boris Johnson, they're tuning in to see what's happening here. And they are seeing it demonstrated before their eyes, because we have to be aware, the punters, the general punters out there, are not watching the Scottish Parliament every day. They're not watching, and in many ways, it's not the best advert anyway because of the back and forth and the way it is. Here you're demonstrating and showing this is how we would do things. This is how you can do things in an independent country. And I think that the fact that Nicola in particular will not be drawn into a political fight about it, will not be drawn into taking it as a political advantage, actually plays to the people of the country thinking they are acting in our best interests. And it being demonstrated in front of them how a government, an independent government would work, even when they get things wrong. And being mature enough to go, no government gets everything right. You know, much as we would like it, they get things wrong during that time. So I suppose I haven't really answered your main point of this, but I do think incrementally the demonstration every day of how to govern a country and having the best interests of its citizens at its heart.
Yeah.
Allows people to forgive mistakes, and I appreciate the fact that they have not allowed it to become about independence, right on the front of it. But I think many non-Indy supporters will have taken that too. Mm-hmm. That the mere fact that here you have people trying to do their best for this wee bit of land, and its citizens, is more of, it's not about vote winning, but more of a demonstration of what an independent Scotland could do. Absolutely, and they have managed to create a trust and a respect and work with integrity, all the things that all of us would want to see. You know, someone who works in health and social care, the care home aspect is really awful. And I think a show not teller in there might be, you know, take it on the chin what comes out of the inquiry, and really be brave enough to make the changes that need to be made, because that's it's all of us, it's all of our families, it's all of ours, it's in all of our stories in some way, isn't it? I don't think there will be one member of the present Scottish Government, and to be fair, even in our Parliament, that doesn't see what a terrible price we have paid for a privatisation of our care homes, and the direction of travel of many political decisions over a period of years, and you take it on the chin, and I think on those politicians in senior positions, Nicola, Jean included, I think this will have a lasting effect on them for the rest of their lives. Absolutely. As human beings, as it will on all of us. But to be, what you're demonstrating out there is good governance. And also being grown up enough to go, oh, they made a mistake there. Mm-hmm. That was wrong. And not pretend that it's all going to be over by Christmas. No. Yeah. Exactly. Talking about things being over, we're nearly at the end now. We definitely could go on. Is it still Thursday? Well, my husband thought it was Saturday this morning, so who knows? Oh, well, it's got to that now. Yeah. Would you just finish by saying a wee bit about why Voices for Scotland's important to you? I actually didn't say that you're president of SIC, and a new role and a really important one. So could you say just a wee bit about Voices and what it means for you before? Well, I wanted to be involved in Voices. I have been chair of the Independence Convention for 20 years or whatever. And I suppose Voices for Scotland for me was something that was more open, and that it was allowing people who were undecided or people who were absolute no's to talk together. That was really, really important to me. I think in order for us to move on, and it not just to be about party politics or yes or no, but that there was a safe space, if you like, for people to come together and discuss and talk about ideas, and not feel that because they voted no that they wouldn't be allowed in or something like that. People had really, really legitimate and good views, positive views for voting no. They didn't think it was right. I disagreed, intently with them. But you've got to understand that for many, many people, they were not convinced. They were not convinced by the arguments. And Voices for Scotland, for me, seemed a more open forum, if you like, that people who were frightened to cross the bridge or not aware of what it was, they weren't shut out. Yeah. Those women that I described walking with their shopping past the yesers when we were all celebrating and looking and going, oh, that's not for me. Yeah. they're the men and women I want to go, no, come on, come and listen, come and be part of this, because your voice in an independent Scotland will matter. All our voices will matter.
Yeah.
And for me, that is what is important to say to as many people who I love dearly who voted no. And I hope that Voices for Scotland would be that platform, along with the Independence Convention, that would bring all those groups, those indie groups together, but also to have this overarching group that would say all voices in Scotland matter.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. I couldn't have put it better. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. And the final thing for me to say, and this is I've worked in the charity sector for many years, so I'm kind of used to asking for money. And we don't get any income from anyone else other than all the people we're speaking to and supporting in this. So please do, if you can find some money to support us. I know these times are difficult, but also some of us have made wee savings in lockdown. So
Listen, I can't believe how much cheaper my outgoings are now, I'll tell you, because I'm not going out for dinner and not going out for all those things and thinking I don't need a new top because I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we could be sitting here in our bottom jammies, as we all know.
Exactly.
You only need a nice top.
Nobody wants to see a topless. They're not wanting that. But I'm actually just in my pants sitting here just now. Who knows? But I do think it's a really valid point that as an organisation we are part of that wider independence movement and want to move, but we want to listen to those people who are coming along and to the cause, but they want to know more. They want to be part of something that they don't feel excluded from. And I think in the midst of us bringing lots of people over during the independence movement, there was a lot of people that felt, oh, that's not for me. I'm excluded from that. That's a private club in some way. It ain't. This is about this country and its future.
Yeah, yeah. And we all love it. We all want the best for it.
Yeah. If you're a Tory landowner or whatever, or it doesn't mean we love this country more than anywhere else. It's about how we govern ourselves and how we run ourselves to the best for all the people that live here.
Thank you, Elaine, and thanks for your support for Voices, and any support that all of you out there could give will be hugely important for us. It's been a really difficult time, as it has been for many, so I don't want to overplay that. We have another Thursday get-together next Thursday. Anyone who's here wants to join in. And we've got another webinar. Not going to give away anything, but we've got really exciting webinars ahead to look forward to.
A great idea.
I don't think we'll top this one, Elaine.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
All we've not had is this song. So
well,
enjoy.
That's because I'm not drunk yet.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the glass as I go out the door.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Elaine. It's been great.
Pleasure.
Thanks to all of you.
And to everybody who tuned in as well. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good night, everyone. Yeah.
Bye.